So as those of you who have spent time with me on these calls before, read any of my stuff know, what I'm interested in engaging with folks around is exploring what's here, investigating what's here, and discovering the myriad ways in which our actual experience deviates considerably from what we think is going on, from our ordinary sort of consensus reality ways of framing things and interpreting things and understanding things. And I think that one well, there's many ways that that's the case, but one that's sort of coming to mind right now is that conventionally speaking, we imagine ourselves as someone, a person, an individual who exists in a world, an objective world. And this is just taken for granted for the most part. And so it's really as if oftentimes that the way we seem to be encountering reality is that there's experience happening sort of over there to some degree, even if it's subjective experience, what we call, internal to us. There's still this kind of subtle sense, not so subtle sense of it's over there and I'm here. The experience is happening to me. I'm encountering thoughts, feelings, sensations, circumstances, events. They're over there, I'm here, right? I mean, for the most part, nobody really questions that way of rendering the moment. But it's really interesting because that rendering is actually conceptual. It is not experiential. And there's nothing wrong with the conceptualization. I mean, it's a perspective. It's a way of encountering reality, for sure. But I'd like to invite you right now to just feel what's here, feel the flow of life, the flow of experiencing. It's all we're feeling anyway, ever. And one of the things that's extraordinary about experience, the way it appears, is that maybe we could begin by looking at the visual field with your eyes open. And whatever it is you're gazing upon, whatever it is that's being seen, shows up as seemingly separate phenomena, discrete phenomena in the visual field, doesn't it? That we have names for, many names for, these different discrete visual objects appearing. But if you actually just look at the visual field, the paradox is that what is appearing as seemingly discrete objects is actually seamless. It's actually a seamless continuum. In other words, we are effectively conceptualizing them as separate because experientially, even just in terms of the visual field, if you actually look, like I'm looking at a wall with a picture, a photograph on it, actually a painting, and there's a frame around the painting, and there's reflections from the light behind me on the painting. There's a plant that's covering most of the painting. So I'm describing these as all these separate things, but when I look at any of these apparently bounded objects, there is no actual dividing line between any of them. There's no place where one object comes to an end and then the next one begins. I mean, if you look at that, if you imagine there's a line there, oh yeah, I can see that that thing is separate from that. But look again, look in your visual field and see if you can actually find a gap between any of the objects. There's no gaps, is there? There's no place where it comes to an end, boom, there's a gap, and then the next thing begins. It's not like that. A wonderful, illustration of this, or metaphor, if you will, is a rainbow, right? So if you look at a rainbow in the sky, it shows up clearly as discrete, seemingly discrete colors, right? That we know as the colors of the rainbow. But if you look at the rainbow, it's absolutely one so-called discrete color merges into the next so-called discrete color, merges into the next so-called. In other words, it's an absolute continuum it's a continuum of light, the spectrum of light, isn't it? And so what is a continuous spectrum of, we could call it in the visual field, of light, different wavelengths of light, different permutations of light, that shows up as discrete, like in the case of the rainbow, discrete colors, but is actually absolutely a seamless whole. There is no separation anywhere in the visual field. Now, what's really wild is we're just looking at one sense field in this case, but if you look at the full field of experience, just encounter the full field of experience and all the different dimensions that we describe as, well, we were just talking about sight, but now there's sounds. There's the sound of my voice, isn't there? And there may be a sense of touch, maybe touch points where you're sitting. My hands are resting on this wicker chair, so sensation of touch. There's sound. I hear waves. I'm near the sea. I hear my own voice. I see color and shadow and light. I'm aware of thoughts. That's like another kind of extrasensory sense field, thoughts, thinking. There's, and I could go on and on and on, sort of cataloging all the things occurring in the field of experience, right? And we talk about them, again, like we might talk about the separate colors of the rainbow as discrete, separate colors, right? But they're actually a continuum. There's no boundary line there anywhere that can be found. And curiously, and that's just in the visual field, but what's interesting is that feel the way in which, even though, say, sound and sight, sound and the visual field show up as, appear as discrete, separate, the sound is also seamless from sight, isn't it? Where is the field of sound? Where is that? Where is its boundary line? Where does the sound come to an end? And can you find a place where it's actually separate from the visual field experientially? Or are they absolutely, it's as if one is coming out of the other and the other is coming out of the other. It's like everything is coming out of everything else. One thing, appearing as all this multiplicity. Extraordinary. It's extraordinary. And whatever we feel of as ourselves, whatever that might be, this constellation of body sensations and personality characteristics and individual history and the whole experience of being an individual that we all know and love so well. That's all experience, isn't it? We experience ourselves as a seemingly individuated, autonomous creature in a world. But feel the way the experience of the self, just like all the other aspects of the experiential field, is absolutely seamless from the rest of the field. You are an experience. And that experience of you is both simultaneously seems to show up as separate from the field, like, oh no, there's experience and there's me, like clearly a distinction. There's a subject in an objective world. And yet, curiously, as experience, that's not, you cannot find you as, you can't pull yourself out of the field of experience. Oh, here I am separate. No, because you are the field of experience. You are inseparable from the field of experience, whatever you are. There's just experiencing. There's no subject and object from that perspective. Feel the way in which no subject and object can be found. You could say the fundamental, almost primal human assumption of being in a subject in an objective world. And yet experientially, you cannot find a subject and an object. You just find this flow of experiencing. I wrote this little meme, I don't know, a few weeks ago, I can't remember when. And I say, I invite you to feel this right now. Just feel the flow of your experience. Feel the flow of experience. And as you do so, notice that no clear boundary line separating self from other can be found. Feel that. There's just a flow of experience. One seamless whole, undivided field. It may show up as all apparent divisions and phenomena as seemingly separate from each other, but there's just a seamless whole of reality, the reality of experiencing the reality of life. Feel that. No subject and object. No self and other, just this. As you feel that, notice something quite interesting. Maybe you have a sense of this. How peaceful that is. How at ease that is. The seamlessness is complete. It's the peace that passeth understanding. It's in this seamlessness, this seamless whole of experiencing, just notice the way in which there is no subject or object, is there? There's just this, there's just the flow of experience. And the deep peace and the ease of that is, we could say, due to the fact that there is not one thing pushing against another thing. There is not one thing wanting something else. This is the deep ease and peace of having nothing to obtain, and there's no one to obtain it. There's just this, the flow of experiencing. Just notice that. Notice that there's absolutely no separation. There is no division in experience. It's astonishing. And just let yourself enjoy that for a few moments. Enjoy the undivided nature of this, the inseparable nature of this. The fact that no subject and object can actually be found. Enjoy the flow of experiencing. That whatever you may imagine yourself to be is simply the flow of experiencing. Everything is the flow of experiencing. And it is a flow, and this is an amazing, sometimes overlooked aspect of the flow, is that the texture or the quality or the flavor or the sense of the field is in this process, you could say, or of constantly opening into something else. It's unstoppable, isn't it? The flow is unstoppable. The flow of this unfolding into the shape shifting into the next instant. And it really is like, it's like a time lapse, you know, of the flower that's just in this continuous, it's like a continuous emergence, a continuous birth, but never really fixing, never really solidifying, actually, never really holding still. And this is always the case, which, as I often talk about, is one of the reasons why this is impossible to define. This is impossible to determine and characterize, right? Because whatever you've characterized seemingly, whatever consciousness has seemingly put into some frame of conceptualization and understanding and interpretation is absolutely morphed into the next instant. So where did it go? It just became the next thing, unstoppably. And again, it's not like we're some static, solid, fixed thing over here watching all of this movement and dynamism. That's really not the case. It's like we are, again, inseparable from the dynamism, whatever we are, whatever we imagine ourselves to be. There's just this dynamism, just this constant unfolding, this constant appearing and disappearing and appearing and disappearing. It's pure freedom. Freedom from any identity, freedom from any conceptualization, freedom from any rendering whatsoever. Because the rendering goes up in a puff of smoke, just like that. No sooner than the moment appears, it vanishes. And this ever-changing flow of qualities of the way, you could say, the way in which this appears to be one way to say, you know, the flavor of the moment. What does the flavor seem to be is it can be quite subtle, the way in which it's changing, you know, tiny little, barely perceptible, subtle, nuanced ways in which the moment is actually changing. And I think that in some ways, the subtle nature of the transformation of the instant, the way in which it is, sometimes it really is often exceedingly subtle and nuanced, and maybe part of what leads us to imagine it as somehow being the same, more or less, right? Having a certain kind of continuity. Yeah, I'm kind of pretty much the same guy sitting here that started the Zoom call 20 minutes ago. But not at all. Nothing is the same from moment to moment. The beauty is that we don't have to, all that I've been attempting to sort of convey and characterize and describe, you know, which is impossible, of course, but sort of pointing to that in some way. There's nowhere to go to find what I'm talking about, is there? Because it's simply what's here. So there's nothing to look for, just look, if you will, at what's here. Feel the presence of what's here and watch it slip away. Feel the way in which, to find the undivided, inseparable nature of this, there's nowhere to go to look for that. It's right here. It's your very experience right now, is pure inseparability, pure indivisibility, pure seamless, borderless, boundless experiencing, isn't it? But there's nowhere else to find that. It's not anywhere else. There is no anywhere else. There's just this. Nothing actually pushing on something else or pulling on something else. Just one thing appearing as many things. One life force, you could say, one reality, one energy. There's no words for, whatever it is that's appearing. What are all the appearances? What is each appearance, each moment made of? There's no way to describe that, of course. I couldn't possibly say what it's made of. Some indescribable groundless ground that everything is made of. But everything means everything. And so I think, as it might have been last week we talked about, or the week before, about there not really being a hierarchy of experience from this perspective, because every experience is a doorway into the same groundless ground, the same presence, the same energy, the same reality that can appear in infinite number of different ways, but is always itself. It's always reality. So there's no, certain experiences aren't closer to the reality than other experiences. Certain appearances aren't closer to the ground, to God than others, because they're all the shining of this one reality. They're all appearances of the light, which makes it easy in a sense, because we don't have to go anywhere again to find it. It's finding us, so to speak, in each instant as the instant that's appearing. This is it. Even as this is constantly changing, it always remains this, doesn't it? The great paradox. Always becoming something else, but always simply being. Maybe that's a good stopping point to see what might be on your minds around this exploration and what I've been speaking about.
Hi, John.
Hey, Sam.
Yeah.
Nice to see you.
And thanks for that. You too. It was really good. So I think you've probably mentioned this before, but Do you feel one of the biggest barriers to seeing, or a barrier to seeing things as they really are, is the concept of seeing and hearing, like the idea that you're seeing and hearing rather than it just being everything's just here, and we see things through our concepts, and that creates some sort of distance. I'm trying to get like away from the idea that I'm seeing and hearing things, and rather that everything is just here inexplicably.
Mm-hmm.
Is that?
So do you mean? Just want to make sure I understand. So, are you questioning? Are you asking whether conceptualizing some phenomena and describing them as seeing and other phenomena as hearing is part of the problem? Is that what you were wondering?
Yeah, just basically
Yeah.
saying, "Oh, I'm seeing that object. I'm hearing these."
Right.
And then it's at some point, or at least some part of me imagining there's an ear as a process, rather than it just being everything here immediately and there not being a process. There's some distance that seems to create. I don't know whether that is one area that I thought would be problematic in terms of seeing things.
Not being a process. Can you say more what you mean?
Well, I guess from what I understand, from what you've been saying, kind of reality, everything is just here immediately. There's no process. But I've been taught that I'm seeing things, so I've got this idea that there's light coming through my retina and forming an image in my brain.
I see.
Just that whole concept, rather than just experiencing what is here immediately without that concept.
Right. Yeah.
I feel like that could
it's a, as I sometimes say, it's like a matter of, perspective, because from one perspective, we could say we have language that suggests these discrete, distinguishable phenomena like seeing and hearing that seem to function in a kind of process, right, over what we could call time, right? So all of that is a perspective, and it's in a sense, it's not untrue. It's like from within. It's like being an individual, from one perspective, I'm an individual and I'm not you. That's like a perspective. I can experience reality in that way, and it's not untrue. It's not wrong. It's like the reality, whatever this is, can absolutely show up as all these things like perspectives and separation and language and concepts and descriptions and definitions. And so that's part of its, you could say, part of its dance. It's one of its ways of showing up, of appearing clearly. Because here is all this stuff that we didn't make. We didn't make language and conceptual. We wouldn't even know the first thing about how to create language and concepts. Something did. Reality created all of that somehow, right? So I think it's always important to not, there's nothing that, I'm not interested in negating anything in the way I talk about this. But simply pointing out that the ordinary kind of conventional described world perspective of people, places, and things, and subjects and objects, and a world and a self, and is just not, it's not the whole story. There's a whole nother, realm of, we could call it, or perspective of the indescribable nature of this, the mirage-like nature of this, the unresolvable or indeterminable, inconceivable nature of this. And that becomes very interesting perspective to explore, and a very liberating perspective to explore, and a very somehow profoundly nourishing perspective to explore, and enlivening perspective to explore. And that just seems to be a sense of it as I experience it. And so, for example, if you contrast, as I was in the initial sort of inquiry, the ordinary perspective of I'm a person in a world basically looking for things, either looking for things that are going to bring me satisfaction, or seeking to keep at bay things that I think are not going to bring me satisfaction, avoid them, try to get away from them, whether they're events or subjective experiences that I think are not to my liking, right? So that kind of describes a lot of the human experience, chasing after happiness, right? In all the different things we think will bring that fulfillment. So that, and I mean, if we look at the world, it's like, there's a lot of what we could call suffering going on, isn't there? It's pretty rampant.
Mm.
I've really been feeling this lately. You know, I teach, as many of you know, I teach grad students in psychology, and wow, there's, particularly among young people, and this is a bit mystifying to psychologists, let's say, there's a kind of almost an epidemic of mood dysregulation and anxiety. It's really striking. Most of my grad students report like experiencing a lot of anxiety. They're in their 20s, most of them, not all of them. Just to say that many people are struggling in one form or another with their experience, seemingly, and looking to find a resting place, a place of well-being, and seeming to struggle to find that, and looking for it in all the ways humans look for it. All of that, the human quest for fulfillment and well-being and wholeness comes out of that way we tend to describe reality as I'm a separate individual, an autonomous individual looking for X, Y, or Z. And then there's this other perspective that we were talking about at the outset, or touching and noticing, which is, wow, when you feel the flow of experience here, you just feel the presence of what's here. You can't find that. You can't find someone looking for an object. You can't find subject and object, which basically renders the whole notion of a separate person looking for fulfillment, it just literally like lays that to waste. Yeah. Just by feeling what's actually here experientially. And so the sense of that is a sense of profound fulfillment, profound wholeness, profound completeness, because there's nothing missing. There aren't things to be missing. So, and we can in a sense play with moving in and out of those perspectives, and in a sense are moving in and out of those perspectives, the perspective of separation and the perspective of inseparability. But we could say that the two perspectives, to generalize them broadly, so have a different feeling to them, or a kind of a different sense of what they might mean for the human, or the implications of them, maybe we could say. Mm. And yeah. And so you know, to put it very kind of crudely, it just feels so much better to recognize that there isn't any subject or object here. It's so rich. It's so there's nothing missing. There's just reality. There's no, you know, it's, as my favorite ocean and wave metaphor, there's no longer a wave looking for something. There's just the sea that's showing up as all the waves of experience. But when we recognize that every wave of experience is inseparable from the sea of reality out of which it has arisen, we could say, each appearance is an appearance of this light, this all-pervading light of reality showing up as all of this. Well, that just changes. It's a complete game changer, because then there's this increasing sense of, no matter the appearance, no matter the experience, one has never left the ground. One has never left the only thing that there is. So we are very much only ever at home, no matter how it's looking, no matter how it seems to be, no matter how the flavor seems to be showing up. And yeah, I don't really know if I really addressed your question, but
yeah, no, you did. Yeah, absolutely. I think you've also said before, kind of, experience doesn't need an experiencer. It just is, you know, there is no center or person, you know, experiencing necessarily. It's just being, everything is here already.
Here already, yes.
Which, yeah, which I think, yeah. But yeah, that's it, John. Thank you. That was great.
Yeah. Yeah, and the here already is, worthwhile reflecting on and encountering and noticing, because this is here already. This is all of this, the full display of reality just here, absolutely inexplicably, just here without any doing on we're not here like, figuring out how to make all of this. This is just here, all of it, consciousness, perceiving, sensing, knowing, recognizing, all of it just here, spontaneously. And wow.
Thanks.
Yeah, thanks.
I thought I might ask a question, John.
Hi, Wayne.
You alluded to life force energy, and I'm wondering whether you experience life force energy in the same way as you experience objects, or let me put that another way. For example, we hear sounds, we see visual objects visually, we feel sensation inside the body, we can notice thoughts inside wherever they come from. And then there's the field of life force energy, or aliveness, or God, whatever you want to call it. I'm wondering how you experience that.
Well, what I would say is that all of the seemingly discrete, describable phenomena you were talking about, thoughts and sensations and objects, are all encountered, you could say, via the mechanism of experiencing itself. In other words, what you're calling a thought arises that you recognize and label as a thought. And how do you know that? Because you're having an experience of what you're calling a thought, right? Well, what thought is a complete mystery, of course, like everything else. But something is appearing, just like sounds are appearing right now. Thoughts appear, sounds appear, sensations appear, right? Light appears. And the appearances, we could just say, this is tricky. It's like these words are kind of synonyms for one another. It's like the appearance of the moment is the experience of the moment. They're the same thing. They're like two different words. The appearance of this moment and the experience of this moment they're the same thing. The moment appears and it's experienced. It's inseparable. And so the way I would characterize it is that it's like it's all the life force energy, everything that's experienced. So what we call a thought is an experience of a particular, you could say, spectrum of the life force energy, a particular way in which the life force energy can be encountered and seemingly described. This, in a sense, it's all kind of vibratory, it's all alive. Thoughts are life, aren't they? They're alive. They're something appearing. There's a liveliness to them. There's an aliveness to them. There's a presence to them, isn't there? And that the presence of each thing that's appearing, no matter how we're characterizing and describing it, is life, is existence, is reality. Again, just throwing words at whatever all of this is. But one thing that can be very helpful, and I often talk about, is we're so used to the perspective of everything is different and distinct, and then generally going about our search for, whether it's in a more secular, non-spiritual sense of just basically I'm searching for happiness and well-being, or a spiritualized sense of I'm searching for God or enlightenment or freedom. When we're only operating from that and only seemingly familiar with the perspective of all the difference and differentiation of everything, we have a tendency to create, I talked about this, I think last week, these hierarchies of, this is closer, this is more reflective of happiness and well-being and God, whereas this is not, based on how I'm describing it. So in order to discover the singularity of everything, in a sense, we have to discover what's common about everything. What is the common denominator, if you will, of all of this seeming differentiation? And there's different doorways into discovering the common denominator. But I think one really powerful one is to feel and notice the way in which everything is, in a sense, energy. Everything is the energy of life, an expression of life energy. Everything. What is not that? Everything is, that's experienced as an expression of the life energy. A different way the life energy can appear. A different way the force of life or the Shakti of life can show up and seem to be. And so and because of that, one of the revelations that arises from seeing that, noticing that, is that no experience, no appearance is closer to the primal life force than any other, because they're all the primal life force. So sadness is no less the primal life force than joy. They're the same primal life force, just different versions. Any more than yellow is more light than red or blue. They're all light, aren't they? They're all light. So all the colors, all the flavors, all the textures, all the qualities, differentiated qualities of reality are all made of the same stuff, whatever that is. That it's of course beyond comprehension what everything is made of. The physicist would say this about matter. It's incomprehensible what matter is constituted of. And the same holds true for looking at it more experientially, is that what experience is constituted of, no matter its description, is utterly inconceivable, utterly ungraspable. Just look at experience, no matter what you might be labeling it as. Look at thought. You mentioned thought. What is thought as an experience? Go into the subtlety of it. Feel the subtlety of thought. How fine it is, how subtle it is. And the subtlety is just made of more subtlety and more subtlety, to the point where you couldn't possibly say what thought is made of. And this is true of every thing that's encountered, no matter, again, how we're labeling it. And as I was saying to Sam, encountering the inconceivable, bottomless nature of all this phenomena that we have names for and descriptions for, seemingly, reveals this whole other world of well-being, in a sense. And why is it a world of well-being? Because that indescribable nature of every state, every moment, is absolutely free of the ways that we describe and characterize it. So it's free of lack, it's free of incompleteness, it's free of problem. Everything is free of all the labels, fundamentally, because this can't be captured in a label. It can't be contained and boxed by any of our frames of reference, period. And that's liberation. It's liberation from all of the frames of reference. This is utterly beyond comprehension. And in its utter beyond comprehension, incomprehensible nature, is the most exquisite freedom, the most boundless, indescribable sense of freedom. And so I was saying to Sam, we're talking like perspectives. Yeah, from one perspective, some event is occurring. I might label it as a problem that requires some fix, some solution. Fair enough. I certainly live my life from within that perspective, not infrequently, right? Taking care of life situations and that might be challenging or problematic, and addressing them in whatever ways I find myself inclined to address them. But from this other perspective, there are no problems requiring solutions. There's just the inconceivable flow of this miraculous thing we call life. It's utterly beyond the human notions of good and bad and positive and negative. And it's a different perspective, that's for sure. And here it is. It's not anywhere else.
Another question?
Yeah, please. Yeah. I was just going to say just one thing about that is that that can sound so like far out, like somehow far away potentially, but it's actually in the feeling of this moment. Actually, the very feeling of this moment is incomprehensible. No matter how many concepts we might be throwing on it, consciousness might be throwing on top of it to try to understand it. No problem with that. But if you simply feel the presence of what's here, we can discover its incomprehensible nature, its problem-free nature, the feeling of it. And that's very much what my work is about, is inviting people into that exploration and discovery. Sorry, you were going to ask something else.
I might have difficulty just asking the question, but it's a question again about life force energy, and whether the world of form is arising out of the life force energy, or is the life force energy more or less a constituent of all form?
Yeah, I mean, what's tricky is what when we use these words, what are we referring to? You know, so for example, when we say form, what are we referring to? Or when we say life force energy, what exactly? This is the challenge of language, is that when we use language, there's a suggestion that we're referring to something. And then the question becomes, and I'm often repeating this to people, is, you know, whatever word we're using to characterize whatever dimension of reality, let's call it form. I mean, the form of this moment, the shape of this moment, the form of you as an individual, let's say, or a body form. What is it actually? What are the forms? And, you know, the famous Buddha saying that emptiness is form and form is emptiness. I don't tend to use the language of emptiness because I don't think it's useful. I think it has a lot of sort of weird connotations, so I don't use it typically. But what that means essentially is that when you investigate any form, anything that's appearing as form, that's taken shape in some way, and you investigate it experientially, not analytically so much, but experientially, you investigate the forms and you discover the formless. You discover that you can't pin down, you can't get to the bottom of what the form is. You can't find what is, you know, the form that is Wayne. You know, the apparition of Wayne, the existence of Wayne as an individual, that formed reality, that manifestation of reality. What is Wayne? Who is Wayne? How do I get down and pin down what Wayne is as a form? I can't, because Wayne is empty of definability, of conceivability, because you're infinite. Everything is infinite. Everything is made of this infinite reality, whatever we want to call that. And so because of that, nothing is ultimately definable in some kind of fixed way. And that's what's meant by the forms are empty. But this that is indefinable and inconceivable and ungraspable shows up as form. Obviously, look at the world, filled with all these things that we call the forms of life. Beautiful, amazing. I mean, the forms are extraordinary, but it's you know, the mirage is a great metaphor I sometimes use because it certainly looks like something. There's no denying it looks like whatever the mirage is. And then when you go to investigate the mirage and what the mirage is made of, you come up empty-handed, don't you? Or the rainbow also, it works well as a metaphor for this. It looks like something, shows up as this incredible color in the sky, and then you go to find the rainbow. What is the rainbow made of? And what do you come up? You come up empty-handed. It's made of space. And the space is made of who knows what. And this is just an amazing paradox that it seems like we know what all of this is. It seems to show up as formed and patterned. And then whenever we investigate and take the time and care to look with some sensitivity and precision at what the forms are made of, we come up empty-handed every time without fail. And that empty-handedness means we can't get to the bottom of what the forms are made of. That's true experientially, and it seems to be true scientifically in an empirical way. We come up empty-handed. We can't figure out what this is made of, which is amazing because, you know, You look at the table, I'm looking at the table over there. What's obvious? It's made of wood. It's a form right there. But if I investigate it at a material level closely, well, eventually I come up with what the hell is it? Literally. Because the wood is made of what, molecules which are made of subatomic particles, which are made of. I go down the rabbit hole of what anything is made of. And what do I come up with? Wow. I don't know what that, it looks from one perspective, come on, it's just a simple form, it's a table. That's one perspective. But boy, if I turn the kaleidoscope, I might see it in a very different way, depending on my perspective. From another perspective, it's a dance of quantum probabilities. So in a sense, which perspective is the true perspective? In a sense, they're both true. Just depends on your vantage. So in a very real way, I'm just introducing a particular perspective, which is the perspective that reveals that none of the perspectives can really hold together because they're frames of reference, and the frames of reference are too small to hold the vastness of this. They're too limited, and this is without limit. This is without definition. Not philosophically, but experientially, it's unlimited. Yeah. Thanks for
So what came to mind with Wayne's question to
Yep.
me is that you have something called a form and something called the life force.
Yeah.
And we talk about it as if they're two different things, and you want to know how they relate to each other, but they're not two different things. It's like Wayne and your body. Is Wayne inside the body, or is the body inside Wayne? They're the same thing. So again, the perspective of looking at the sameness of things versus the distinctions.
I mean, sometimes and it's well said. And I mean, sometimes I'll talk about this when I'm pointing out, like, one way to discover what's common about all experiences, to sort of, in a sense, reduce all the seeming difference and differentiation into some common element. And sometimes it can be useful to feel everything as kind of energy, as a sort of subtle energy, a dance of energy, and that the different ways we describe that may be as thought, feeling, sound, bodies, minds, events. But why that can be useful is that everything is experience. That's how we know anything, is through experience. And the alive nature of experience, the dynamic nature of experience, has a quality of movement, of energy, of dynamism, of the force of life itself. And everything is alive in that sense. Everything is alive. And so that can be useful as a way of getting more to what's most primal about everything, most fundamental about everything. But ultimately, when I say something like life force energy to describe what's common about all this phenomena, well, what is life force energy? I can investigate it and go, what the hell is that? I have no idea what energy is. I can't find that either. So, but it can be a useful sort of kind of initial doorway into what's common to all of this stuff, all that it's appearing. It has that, yeah, it has a energetic kind of feel to it, to me, a liveliness to it, and aliveness to it.
Hi.
Hi, Zoe.
Hi.
Nice to see you.
Thank you. What I like about your perspective and your invites that I experience every time I'm here with the group is this sense of absolute freedom. It's a sense of what in French they call it légèreté, like you don't have weightlessness, which brings me to experience the flow, the oneness, without really naming it, without giving it too much of panache, so what? Why? Because it's so natural. It's so home. It's like when I was a child, I was always here.
Mhm.
So, the mind is addicted to see how is it there? How come I mess up? Quote unquote, messing up meanings away from this
Right.
lightness and freedom.
Right.
And I invariably come up with this idea that I have learned and have perpetuated this the prison of concepts. I'm not saying that concepts are bad,
Mhm.
but the way I've been taught, I've been using them as prisons,
Right.
as hindrances, rather than, it's just a door I open, I pass by, I go,
Right.
it's okay. Somehow it encloses, it shuts me down.
Right.
But that's the way I use it. I'm not saying concepts are evil things.
They can, yes, they can lead us to believe that
Yeah.
that this is that this is lacking, that this is limited, that it's imprisoning, that it's a kind of bondage. But again, that this is the power of inquiry into our experience, which is it can keep showing us again and again and again that those concepts don't hold up when they're scrutinized. That's what's so powerful. And that freedom that you were describing, I love the French word, it's like, it's absolutely, it's not something that's over here compared to the rest of the world.
No,
It's absolutely, it is the only thing that exists, actually.
Yeah.
So the real freedom is the discovery that what we call bondage doesn't exist. What we call limitation and lack can't be found. That's the freedom. And so it's never absent, actually. It's only imagined, like you were saying, conceptually. Like, you imagine that there's a wonderful Rumi poem where he says something along the lines of, we imagine that, we're caged, but all the while, that the cage has never been shut. We're not caged. Like, this is not cageable. This is not,
Yeah.
you can't make the infinite finite. You can't make the indescribable. It seems like it can become, collapsed into, like in spirituality, there's a lot of focus on like getting beyond identification, right? And it's like, more powerful is to see that you can't pull off the identification. And I mean identification of anything, not just self-identification, but you can't actually pull it off. It's like, just look. I mean, it looks like it's identifiable, but look again, and you'll see that it doesn't hold up. And it's just this absolute explosive indescribability and freedom from all designations and descriptions. And how wonderful, how wondrous is that there's just freedom. And
what comes to mind when you were talking and Zoe was talking was a mime. How he creates the boundaries,
right,
where there aren't any.
Well, there aren't any. I love that. That's right. Yeah, it's like and sometimes when we talk about this stuff, it can seem like it's something that's so far away from our like present experience. And the beautiful thing is that it's actually your current experience. I mean, this experience right now is what I'm talking. This is the absolute infinite indescribability. This experience, not some other. This experience. And it's just a matter of, to notice that is, in a sense, to turn the kaleidoscope in a particular way. This is kind of I think, to Sam's question about that. Yes, we're sort of habituated to the defining, to the separating, to the sense that the definitions actually are truly capturing what's here. And that's just how we've sort of been, somehow we've been conditioned to think that way. And But experience keeps showing us, nope, it's not that way. I mean, a really powerful example of that is that we just more or less in consensus reality, human existence, take it for granted that there's a kind of continuity to things. I mean, that's just absolutely taken for granted for the most part, that things have a kind of stability over time, but they don't. Look at your experience. It will instantly reveal that there's no stability. There's no continuity. It just shatters that consensus view in one instant of looking and seeing. Try to hold on to this moment. Try to keep this moment from shape-shifting. Try to make it continuous. Boom, it's just gone, up in smoke. And as I say, it's like it doesn't take 30 years on a meditation cushion to discover that, does it? Because experience is revealing it constantly. It's in our face, the instability of this, the discontinuous nature of this. And yet, that discontinuity, it's like, in a sense, I remember one time just reflecting on this, like, how given this discontinuity, this impermanence, how is it that anything even seems to take shape and form? Like, it would seem like it wouldn't be possible for anything to even be visible because of the discontinuity, right? Like, I'm looking at Sylvia, who I know. It's nice to see you, Sylvia. So I'm looking at you, and it's like, experientially, actually, you're not continuous. You're shape-shifting. The experience of you is a constant, even if in the subtlest of ways, like I was describing earlier, like the flow of my experience of you is not holding still. It's a flow. It's constantly changing. And yet, curiously, I can have a kind of experience of a certain continuity of you. Like, how can I even recognize you from the last time I saw you? Well, it seems like I can. There's a continuity. I know Sylvia. And yet, again, it's perspectives. And it's amazing, like, to play back and forth with these. Like, from this other perspective, it's like, no, wow, I've never encountered you before, because both the you that I imagine I'm encountering is constantly shifting, and my experience of you is constantly shifting. So where is the continuity? In a sense, it's just this ever freshness, ever new. Every instant, ever new. Never before seen. How wondrous.
Oh, John, good morning. This is
Hi, Michael.
Great to hear you.
Nice to
I
see you.
a little bit late.
Uh-huh.
But that raises the question then.
Yeah.
Maybe it's a rhetorical question
Uh-huh.
or an unanswerable question. And I'm not, this isn't just something I'm putting out for philosophical reasons, but
Mhm.
it's quite baffling if I look at it. It's how the whole experience of confusion and what could be called samsara,
Mhm.
how could that arise in the first place?
Well, yeah, I mean, in a sense, yes, it's the same question. How do any of the forms arise, including the forms that we might think of as afflictive forms, right?
Yeah.
So how is there form? I mean, in a sense, this is my understanding in the Zen tradition of the unborn, is in a sense that nothing is ever really formed, because the forms vanish upon, in other words, because of discontinuity, it never takes a fixed form. So in a sense, there is no form.
And yet it can certainly seem like there is.
Very much so. I would never debate that. The forms are quite, it sure seems like it's form. And, but emphasis on the seems, like it seems like, that's the paradox, is like, okay, any flavor of experience that I describe, like a moment of sadness, it's like, yeah, absolutely, there it is as a seeming form that's taken shape, that I can describe, I can recognize. It's a familiarity to me. It's got a fragrance that I recognize, right? Sadness.
That's right.
Okay. So, but if I look a little bit more carefully at what I'm calling a solid, fixed, identifiable form, in this case, a subjective state, calling sadness, and I look carefully at it, I realize it's not holding still. It's like I created this little meditation that that I love. It's just like a minute long, and it's a picture. Well, it's actually a video of of uh, of the sea just moving. You know how the sea doesn't hold still; it moves, doesn't it? And I say, so okay, so if I were to ask you or anyone, what is the shape of the sea? In other words, what is the form of the sea?
Right.
In a sense, because of its dynamic nature, its discontinuous nature, it has no form. It has no fixed form. And we could say the same thing about the shape of the moment. Like if you were to describe the moment, if I describe it as sad or joyful or confusing or whatever, I'm seemingly putting it into a shape, a describable shape and form, right? That I've got a name for. But again, if I actually look, it's like, well, what I just described as here's the form isn't there anymore. It's changed form, even if in a subtle way, you know, like the shape of the cloud is not holding still, right? It's moving ever sometimes very dramatically. The shapes are changing sometimes very subtly. But like the form of this moment, it's not holding still. It's shape shifting, isn't it? And so because of that, in a sense, well, that's why Buddhism would say that the forms are empty, because they're formless fundamentally. But the formless, that's the magic show, is it shows up as seeming form, always. They're never, one is always comes along with the other, at least in my experience. The emptiness, the ungraspable, unresolvable, always shows up as something seemingly graspable and resolvable. The formless always seems to show up as, you know, the emperor always seems to have clothes on, you know. It's like it always comes with a certain fragrance, even if the subtlest of fragrances somehow or implications or seeming form. So this is, I mean, as I talk about it and I reflect on like, wow, how something that's utterly inconceivable shows up as seeming conceivability, and something that's utterly without form and is discontinuous shows up as seeming form and continuity is just brilliant. It's just so gorgeous. It's so amazing that it is that way. Like, I don't know. It's yes, believing that the forms have definability and solidity is very much what creates so much of what we call human suffering. And that's why, from my perspective, the real, you know, sort of ultimate medicine for suffering is to see that the forms don't hold up under scrutiny. The definitions are ultimately indefinable. You know, the forms are ultimately empty, which doesn't negate their appearance. It doesn't negate when you see that this is an appearance, it doesn't negate the appearance. It doesn't make it go away. You know, it not necessarily, it may very profoundly change how they're encountered. That's for sure. I mean, it's very different to feel sadness as its infinite, indescribable, ever-flowing, fluctuating, dynamic inconceivability. It's infinite in a sense, nature is very different than feeling it only or solely as a fixed sort of kind of afflictive state of mind. It's just anything but that definition, even though it can show up like that as a recognizable flavor. No question about it. I mean, so that's why I say it's like we paradoxically know what things are, at the same time have no fucking clue what they are.
So the reason, to my mind, is the reason why forms seem to be is because of the similarity effect. In other words,
Right.
I'm seeing the cloud one moment as similar to the next moment, and then I jump in and say, well, they're the same.
Right, right. I think, and of course, you know, the we that you're describing, we could say is, you know, infinity itself in the form of consciousness that's doing all of this kind of rapid fire assessment and kind of, I mean, right, it's like to create a sense of continuity and endurance in the face of absolute discontinuity and impermanence is like, we wouldn't know how to do that. It's like if you think of the consciousness as some kind of supercomputer that's doing that, that's somehow creating the illusion that you are a fixed form that's holding still, somehow I think you're right, I think that it does that by overlooking the difference. Because sometimes the differences are quite subtle, like it's subtle, like the way you are shifting. You know, I show this to my classes sometimes in my grad classes, where I show some pictures of me from when I was a child in my mother's arms to when I was a teenager with wild long hair and a big giant beard, and then up to where I am now in my life, right? And when you look at these kind of, if you look at the course of, say, Ed's, your travels as a human over time, right? Well, it's very obvious that you've morphed into something else from when you were 5 years old, isn't it? It's less obvious to see how you've morphed from 1 second ago, isn't it? It seems like that's where the content, it's obvious discontinuity when you look at your pictures of when you were 5. It's like, I'm not the same. And less obvious from a moment ago. And yet it's the same phenomena, isn't it? It's like you've changed, I mean, in the slightest thing you do, like, just cock your head one way and it's like the whole universe changes. It's subtle, but it's like everything changes. The feeling changes, the sense changes. The sense of the moment changes by the littlest change that occurs. And this is constantly happening. A little flicker of thought and memory just arises. And then that shifts into another flicker of feeling and sensation. And that morphs into this is the absolute unrelenting dynamism of this. And when we notice that, we gain a kind of appreciation for, wow, this is truly not holding still. This is truly not graspable as a fixed form because of its nature, which is, it's alive, it's not static, it's not holding still. And it's amazing. And yes, it can show up as a seeming continuity, as I was saying in my conversation with Michael. It can show up as seeming forms that are pretty convincing. Yeah.
John?
Yeah, hi, Michael.
So this is at times, and it's sort of fleeting and it's tenuous, but it's I would say increasingly the context or background of what I would think of as my experience, the reality that is evident, more and more, and certainly now in your company over this in the Zoom call, that say unpindownable nature or openness, that there's some sense of that, and yet there are things that feel incomplete, like just not to get into a whole long personal thing, but someone that I'm very, very fond of, and I just can't put that down. It's like it's something that I think if I hadn't been such a screw up, it would have been. And I don't feel like I there's enough space around it where I feel I can let it go, but there's a part of me that doesn't want to. So, on the one hand, it would be wise to just put everything down, have the attitude of radical renunciation, do not grasp onto anything, and yet the nature of the heart is it wants to reach out and connect. So sort of a conflict there.
Yeah, I mean, one thing I would say is that whole dynamic, which we all know, what you just described is something we all have our own versions of, of things, you know, I can recall, for example, a relationship in my own life where, you know, loss of it was very significant. The kind of seeming holding on to the relationship felt, you know, difficult at times, because it was this kind of sense of arguing with reality, and, you know, there's a certain kind of pain that would come along with that. I mean, I'm describing a whole kind of scenario, right? Which is
Yeah.
not wholly dissimilar from your situation. But when I come back to that's all in the realm of a narration, in a sense. And I'm not discounting the narration as a phenomena, nor the seeming effects of those narratives, right? I wouldn't discount that for 1 second. But what is so powerful is to, you know, if you look at this concept of kind of letting go, right? Of like letting go of something that seems like it's some persistent habit or a persistent way the mind is grasping hold of something. What's really interesting is that if we actually look, that we can cut through that by seeing that it's not actually the case. In a sense, reality doesn't allow persistence. It doesn't allow holding on, even though we might describe ourselves as holding on to something. Reality just is like, sorry, you can't do it. The moment lets go of itself. That's, you know from your Dzogchen studies, it's the self-liberation upon arising. That is actually, reality is the master of letting go. Reality is the master of not holding on, of not grasping. Mm-hmm. So the idea that we as spiritual practitioners get into, I'm going to become better at letting go and not holding on and not grasping, and right, and so on and so forth. Fair, it's fair, because we feel the pain of the grasping sometimes, and we're then impelled, and especially because we've read the importance of not grasping and letting go. And it's like, okay, and it feels as if, oh yeah, that is something I can do. And meanwhile, reality, the master of masters, the Sat Guru, is like, oh, let me show you how to let go. It is my nature to let go, reality says.
It's letting go-ness.
It's letting go-ness. That is its very nature, is letting go-ness.
Yeah.
And if we feel that, then we get to partake of the wonderful, enriching, nourishing nature of that ever letting go nature of reality, the freedom of that, the lack of bondage, the liberating nature of that. And it's just the way, and it actually really is the way we are, because we are reality. We're made of reality. So we are the very letting go in every instant. So even though we're like, there we are, we're seemingly holding on to something, it's like, if we actually look, even what we call holding on isn't holding on. It's a dynamic experience. What I call, oh my God, I keep holding on to this like old relationship. I keep thinking about it. And it creates a sense of, there's a kind of static, like fixed sort of, kind of, ossified kind of, and it may give off this, there may be the implication of that, or the sense of that. And the as I was saying in my conversation, with Zoe, like it will give the sense of like we're caged in that whole dynamic, that whole narrative. But again, if we go back to the reality of our actual experience, it will reveal that the moment is never caged. It's never caged in any narrative, because it can't be caged, because its nature, like you just said, is letting go-ness. That is its nature. And it won't be any other way, apparently.
Yeah, there's a sort of weird, subtle dynamic going on and with this, because I encountered this person when I was very young in junior high school, after a tumultuous time of my parents' divorce and other things. And just seeing her every day, we had a class together. It brought me into that heart space. It brought me into that space of letting go-ness. And there's an association that has carried that for decades. When I think of her, it brings me back to whatever degree in the moment into that space. And I know, of course, conceptually, that I don't want to mistake the form for the essence.
Right.
This was just, had nothing to do with her per se, but it was just, she was catalytic. And yet, because of the density of my particular conditioning, it's hard to there's so much force
I understand. Yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah, it can just feel like we're just compelled to return to these old sort of patterns of thinking and believing and orienting to our experience in certain ways. No question about it. And I think that the mistake we often make, it's innocent, is to try to kind of fight those tendencies, resist them. And I think that adds fuel to them. It's sort of like, it's a very kind of counterintuitive, paradoxical thing, but like when there's a kind of discomforting, whatever, habitual sort of pattern of experiencing happening, if there's really no effort to make that other than it is, like really, it's just a moment of life appearing in that particular way, it really changes the way that's experienced. It's kind of like, what's that?
Let it be.
Yeah, and in a sense, I was saying this to a friend the other day, it's like a real game changer is we tend, and this circles back to the outset of the call, I was talking about, from one perspective, experiences happening to us. Sometimes that's wonderful, and then when it's not so wonderful, it's not so wonderful, right? And then we struggle with it. And we'll often feel as if we're the victims of experience, and it's happening to me. I'm at the mercy of the flow of my experience. And in that little guided inquiry I did at the outset, it's like just to feel the way in which, rather than events happening to me, the events, the phenomena of life, the flow of thoughts, feelings, sensations, and event is actually just an expression of my nature rather than something happening to me. So my thoughts aren't happening to me. My feelings aren't happening to me. They're an expression of me. They are me. That's a complete game changer, to feel the way in which we're not at the mercy of our experience. Our experience is us. It's an expression of us. So how is it a problem? It's just an expression of me. It's not something I have to manage. It's just an expression of me. And play around with that and see, when you're visited by strong states that you historically have struggled with and found difficult to navigate, and so on and so forth. And then, instead of the usual thing, understandable one that you and many of us engage in, sort of strategies to try to navigate that more effectively, realize maybe there's another perspective, which is I don't have to navigate it. I can just see that it's just an expression of the ground right now. It's just an expression of life, expression of me. It's inseparable from me. There is no separation, actually. And from that perspective of no separation, as I was saying earlier, it ceases to be a problem, the problem that we imagined it, because there's not me here navigating, struggling with whatever, some other thing over there. It's inseparability. It's like that old Zen story, where the monk is struggling with all these demons and doing all his visualizations and prayers and meditations, and he can't get this. He gets all the demons to disappear through his techniques, but this one demon just won't go away. And somehow, just grace or whatever, the monk realizes, kind of stops the struggle and just jumps into the mouth of the demon. And there's no more demon. Isn't that amazing?
Yeah. There's a certain subtle, fine, or I was going to say fine line, or pivotal point where the disposition of what could be called, just for the sake of discussion in this moment, a problem consciousness, where what is arising is something to be dealt with, managed, worked out, to an inclusivity.
Absolutely.
Where that reference is undermined.
That's very well, beautifully said. Exactly. It's undermined. Yeah. It's the recognition that everything is God. Not certain things, but everything. Including, of course, whatever we think of as ourselves.
Right.
And like,
it all it's just like mixing or drawing lines in space. You just can't
Exactly.
yeah, that's right. That's right.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it's wonderful to talk with you, Michael. And
Same here, John. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And pleasure being with all of you. And I wish you a wonderful rest of your day or evening, wherever you may be in the world, and hope to see you again down the road. All right. Take good care, everyone.
Thanks, John.
Thanks, John.
Thank you, John.
Thank you so much.